Hello, and welcome to another edition of AppSec Decoded. I'm Taylor Armerding, security advocate with the Synopsys Software Integrity Group, coming to you from the 2023 RSA conference in San Francisco. And today we're going to be talking about what everybody is talking about, artificial intelligence, AI, and more specifically, large language models like ChatGPT, and even more specifically, about the benefits and risks of using AI chatbots to write code. And with me to talk about that is Mike McGuire, Senior Software Solutions Manager with the Synopsys Software Integrity Group, who says he's not the least bit worried that a chatbot is going to take his job, at least not this week. So, Mike, thanks for taking time out from fraternizing with the mobs on the exhibit hall floor. And to start, okay, why do developers use AI-generated code, and how does that differ from just manually grabbing snippets of code or using entire open source libraries?
It's all about ease, right? It's the same value proposition of going and using open source components, open source libraries in general.
Yep.
As a developer, your job is to complete a feature request or fix a bug, build quality code in a pretty tight time frame, and deliver that to demanding customers. So there's a lot of menial tasks that have to get checked off.
Yeah.
And a lot of those have already been created and built by a whole bunch of different organizations who are probably better at that developer who needs it done. Right. So they're going to go and utilize that and leverage it. Normally in the form of open source, they'll leverage that.
Yep.
Now, your question was, how different is it to go and use some AI-generated code versus going and copying and pasting snippets?
Yep.
Again, it just makes it a lot easier to work within your development environment and have the code immediately put into your development environment, formatted, it's functional, and there's really not a whole lot extra overhead that these developers have to worry about. So same value proposition as leveraging open source any other day, but it just makes it a whole lot easier to get into an application.
Okay, so that kind of, my next question here, you almost completely answered it, but maybe there's some more. Organizations are obviously seeing benefits to using chatbots to create code. So easy is one of them.
Yeah.
I would imagine no coffee breaks, no vacation, no salary would be some other benefits. But what else?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. It all comes back to just the speed and velocity at which software can be developed. I think we all demand very quick turnover of software development. Obviously, if we're using an application on our phone and it has a bug, we get pretty frustrated and we're pretty impatient.
Yeah.
So once you sit back and you think about that, it's not so much a mystery anymore of why there's such focus on development velocity.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the huge benefits. Another big benefit is, again, leveraging this expertise and this experience that a lot of organizations don't necessarily have in-house.
Okay.
Right? They don't have a huge contingencies of developers who are experienced in every single aspect of application development.
Right.
So they don't have to. They really don't have to. And again, that sounds familiar because that's the same value prop of open source.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is just leveraging open source. It's just another channel for open source to sort of seep its way into applications. It's quicker.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And like you say, easier and ultimately cheaper, I would think, right?
Oh, a lot cheaper. Well, easier and quicker tends to be cheaper.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we've been talking about upsides, the good side, the benefits. There are risks as well.
Sure.
There are risks embedded in sources that these AI tools use to learn to write code. And so shouldn't developers be aware of any licensing obligations in open source components, and what kind of trouble? We know it causes trouble if they ignore those.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to refer back to something I mentioned in answering your last question is, this is just another way for open source to find its way into applications. So you do have to take the same risk mitigation approaches as you would any other open source, whether it be a full dependency, whether it just be snippets. And I say that because you should just treat this as if it's any other snippet that's making its way into your applications. Now, some of these AI-generated code platforms like ChatGPT do go out of their way to try to actually modify code enough so that it does not resemble the components that it originated from. But that might not always be the case, and there is no precedent to this. So there's a lot of gray area.
Okay.
So it comes down to if an organization is willing to fight that battle. Do they have the resources to fight that battle if it does come down to it? So ideally, there should be some sort of processes and tools in place to track the open source that's being brought in by these AI generation platforms to match the code that's coming in and the snippets that are coming in to the original open source component if possible. Because if a tool can match it back, then chances are there's some sort of purchase point there where somebody who has a license or IP complaint can try to leverage that for their benefit. So the biggest concern is license obligations, right? This is learning from open source. Open source is free in the monetary sense, but it's not free in the intellectual property sense. So it's getting brought in. There's no context of the license from the original application or the original project that it's part of. And that just introduces a whole lot of risk and a whole lot of unknown, which is, in my opinion, just another way of saying risk.
Sure. Well, and didn't one of our teams find they ran a chat bot and found that it missed a licensing obligation?
Yes. So they did use a AI-generated code platform, and it generated a block of code in an application. And we do have snippet analysis with our software composition analysis tool, and it identified those snippets and matched it back to the original open source project. And that open source project, I believe, had a copyleft license. Which is a pretty restrictive license. And let's just say it's not a license that you want to be taking and modifying and using in your IP, because the terms of that license actually says if you're going to use this component, you have to license your project under the same exact license, which would be an open source license.
Yes. So it means your intellectual property is available to everybody else now, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And you typically don't make any money off of free software.
It still needs human supervision, in other words, AI.
Or tool supervision. It needs processes. It needs consideration.
Thanks so much, Mike. Obviously, this is a discussion that's going to go on the rest of this year and beyond. AI is with us, and we'll see where it goes. But for now, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, this is AppSec Decoded. I'm Taylor Armerding for the Synopsys Software Integrity Group. We help organizations build trust into their software.